Hi everybody, Kevin here.
And Steve, hi.
Hey, we're coming to you from backcountry Colorado near Pikes Peak, and we're spending some good retreat time talking about spirituality and eating some great food and singing songs and connecting with each other and connecting with nature. And now we get to connect with you, which makes us extremely happy. So thanks for joining us. Right? All right.
Indeed. We had put together a video a while back when Kevin and I were together at my house in Lakewood, Colorado, for us to post when it came time to discuss the subject of ego in the meetup group. And we listened to that again this morning, and we're talking almost a month plus, I think, ago that we made that video. And we liked what it said, and I think you may have already seen it. But we've kind of evolved our thinking a bit in having thought about it individually and having talked about it. And so we've got some things we'd like to add to it.
Yeah, we were actually at breakfast this morning talking about ego and in trying to come to terms with what I see as a dichotomy between ego and spirit. I think a good state to be in this human experience is one where the ego is balanced with spirit, and they work well together, but there are times where the ego becomes unbalanced and pushes spirit aside and sort of takes the reins, and I think we were always talking about the fact that ego can take a beautiful snowfall and basically roll it into a ball and start rolling it downhill into a giant snowball that could be kind of destructive at the end point. And so, but having that balance and balance versus spirit, ego versus spirit, was sort of the jumping off point of our discussion. And Steve was having some trouble grokking what that really meant. And then all of a sudden, we kind of hit on a mini epiphany, if you will. And Steve, why don't you talk about what we kind of hashed around?
So the way Kevin was describing it initially, I could kind of resonate with, where you've got a balanced ego, which is basically just what's in essence gives us our individuality. And then the unbalanced ego, which, as we're all familiar with, can take us off on tangents where we are becoming very separate from each other and others, and where we see ourselves as different and better than, in some cases worse than, and having that comparison with others. And I was having a hard time putting that into the perspective of balanced and unbalanced. And as we talked through it, we kind of arrived at a new way of looking at it, which is from the perspective of separation. And that the ego provides for us a sense of, as we said, individuality, but a separation which is in and of itself not necessarily a bad thing as long as it is balanced. In other words, as long as we have, in addition to the perspective of seeing each other as separate beings, of knowing that part at which we are also one.
Right.
And same with society in general. And kind of the idea that we understood was what he had referred to as the unbalanced ego, is where we see ourselves as separate from the other, but do not recognize the fact that there's, at another level, we are the same. And we kind of, that was the epiphany, is that a healthy, balanced ego is one in which you're aware of both the separation as well as the unification at a different level.
And it's not an easy balance to arrive at, and certainly not one that's always easy to maintain. But I think that's sort of the perfect state that we're looking for, where we've got the human experience and we've got the kind of the higher self experience blended together to create an experience that's appropriate and the best it can possibly be. Yeah. And so we came up with also an example of it that we thought would be helpful for people to understand sort of the concept of what we came up with this morning. And Steve, why don't you talk a little bit about the example?
We're trying to think of what is a situation in real life where we can contrast what a healthy or balanced, as Kevin might have put it, or an ego state in which we are aware of our oneness, and one in which we aren't, in which we would consider an unbalanced ego, and where that separateness divides us, and we no longer are in touch with the fact that we have these similarities or even this oneness. And the example that we came up with was one of a spiritual leader, for instance, who sees themselves as being the answer to this spiritual
calling
or conundrum, where
right.
they see themselves as being above someone who doesn't have a spiritual understanding, and they see themselves as separate, and that this person is, you could say above, below, whatever, but the key point is that they're different. They are right. Separate from me, and never will we be the same.
And they promote that through what they're preaching or what they're talking about, that there's that's part of the aspect of what they bring to the table, is this separateness.
Right. So I am the guru, I am the teacher, you are the student. What in the unbalanced or the separative state, there's not an awareness of I am you and you are me. We are one, and this is just an aspect of us where there's some differences, and the spiritual leader then is in a healthy state of ego balance, where they really understand the most fundamental relationship that we have is we are the same, we are one, as opposed to only seeing our differences, and therefore there being kind of a competition or an unhealthy separation.
Right.
That is them versus me,
yep.
them versus me, them versus us, and that creates a lot of difficulties as individuals and in society as a whole.
And you see it a lot. There's many examples of the unbalanced state, if you will. And it's much harder to think of of the balanced state or situations where it could be one or the other. It's usually the unbalanced that's talked about. I've mentioned to Steve before that I've looked on the internet for ego characteristics, and it's the vast majority of it is how bad the ego is and the things that spin it out of control and things, and it's harder to find the other aspect of it where it's in balance with spirit. So I think that gives another good jumping off point for discussion. And believe it or not, this is still not the end of ego. We've done 2 of these videos, and there's probably going to be a number more before we even get close to the end of it.
I don't think we're going to reach the end, Kevin. I think it's a never-ending quest to delve into the depths of what the ego is and how it impacts us as individuals and society.
It's such a huge part of the human experience. How can it not be a big topic to talk about? But yeah, so give us your perspective on it. There are a lot of different ways of looking at ego. This is just one of those, and maybe you have your own epiphanies that you'd like to share, and we'd love to hear it, because as we both have learned, we can change our perspectives if we find one that resonates even more with us than the ones we have at the present.
For sure.
All right. So take care, and we look forward to hearing from you.
Thanks for listening. We'll see y'all later.
Love you guys.
Bye.